that's, of course, the E-flat Clarinet, which I am still working on learning how to play, and that is an excerpt from Berlioz's Funeral and Triumphal Symphony, one of my all-time favorite band pieces. But the purpose of this video today is not to talk about the B-flat clarinet, or the E-flat clarinet rather, because a few days ago I made a video about all the various different sizes of clarinets and why they exist, and, well, I left one out, and I left it out purposefully because, well, it's not that important of a player in clarinet history, but you know what? Everybody commented, where's the A-flat clarinet? Where's the A-flat clarinet? So we're going to cover the A-flat clarinet today. Obviously, I do not own one. They are not common at all. In fact, I have a friend who's going through the process of trying to locate one for a major university just to perform a piece, and while the university actually owns one, it's not usable. It's actually tuned to high pitch, which means about A equals 457, or sometimes even higher to 466. So not going to be usable by modern standards. Now, I start off with the E-flat clarinet, which I admittedly don't play very well. Now, the E-flat clarinet is obviously the smallest size we normally see. However, historically, there have been three sizes smaller than this. The F clarinet, which went extinct probably in the mid-1800s. We have some early works written for F clarinet. There are some pieces by Beethoven, his military band music, and Mendelssohn, same scenario, his wind band pieces. But by and large, the F clarinet just kind of fell out of favor, which is a real shame because it probably could have been the most useful of the high clarinets, being in, well, a much more orchestra-friendly key rather than E-flat. F is a lot friendlier for transposition. Now, of course, there is the A-flat clarinet, which is the smallest clarinet that's ever been manufactured, barring some very rare experimental ones. A few have been made in high B-flat and high C. And we're going to really exclude those because they were never made as usable instruments and, quite frankly, become too small for human hands to play. So let's talk about the A-flat. Oh, and one other. There is a high G clarinet. And the high G and the high A-flat form a pair, just like the B-flat and the A clarinet form a pair, or the E-flat clarinet and the D clarinet form a pair, while the A-flat and the G formed a pair as well. Now, there's a theory that all of the really high clarinets were in G originally, which can make sense if you realize that if you would go from, say you went from Italy to Austria, which geographically is not very far. In fact, they border each other. I've driven from Italy to Austria before. It's, from Venice to middle of Austria is a couple hours. Ooh, big deal. But what would happen is say in Milan or in some of the big Italian opera centers, the pitch center would be really low, maybe A equals 430. But if you went into Austria, the pitch center might have been higher, as high as a 456, or 460 even. And with this pitch discrepancy, a G clarinet made in Austria brought down to Italy would then not be a G clarinet anymore. It would be a A-flat clarinet because the pitch centers were nearly half a step off from each other. Italy wanted to keep the pitch center a lot lower just because it was a much more vocal-centered musical tradition that focused a lot on opera. So this is one theory why the A-flat clarinet exists. It's just that it started out life as a G clarinet, put in a high pitch so high that it raised it up half a step when moved to a low pitch country. That's one theory. The other theory is that it was just simply as small of a clarinet as could be made with a typical fingering layout. And if you follow Renaissance music, you'll know that Renaissance instruments were all built a fifth apart from each other. So you'd have the bass in F, then you would have the tenor in C, then you'd have an alto in G, and then a soprano in D. Well, clarinets kind of followed this route except in four. So you'd have the basset horn in F, and then you'd have the regular clarinet in B flat, and you'd have the E-flat clarinet, and then you'd have the A-flat clarinet, fourth, 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 fourth. That is another theory of why we got the A-flat clarinet. Now, what experience do I have with the A-flat? I have played an A-flat clarinet exactly one time in my life. In fact, I'll insert a picture right now where I got to play the A-flat clarinet about 3 years ago. And it is a tiny little instrument. My big fingers really could not cope with it. They barely cope with being able to play the E-flat clarinet, particularly the right hand on the E-flat. My fingers are just scrunched up next to each other. So the A-flat is even smaller than that, and the fingers start overlapping. Be something for somebody a bit smaller than myself to play. We don't see a lot of music for the A-flat clarinet in standard literature. In orchestra, there are a couple of pieces that call for it. There, go back to Italian works, and Verdi included it in a few of his operas, but only in the stage band music. This was actually music that was meant to be played on stage during the opera, particularly something like La Traviata. In the scene Brindisi, there's an onstage band, and Verdi's original orchestration has a high A-flat clarinet part. In fact, Verdi has the player go between A-flat and G clarinets, depending on the key. And this is one of the few examples. Now, most opera production companies rewrite what are called the banda parts and put them on like string quartet or something. So the A-flat clarinet part just goes away. There is a early Bartók piece that calls for it. There's an A-flat clarinet and E-flat clarinet duo, and I think it's one of his scherzos. It was one that was written early but published after he died. And then there's some more contemporary works. I believe there's a piece by Henze, maybe a few others, but there's not a lot. Now, in the wind band music, we don't really see A-flat clarinet in the American tradition. We really only will see it in Italian bands and Austrian bands. And in my book, I happen to have it right here, Band Orchestration Volume 2, I talk a little bit about these traditions, and I show some examples by Anton Bruckner. Anton Bruckner wrote one piece for the wind band, and he uses A-flat clarinet way up top, which was the tradition in Austrian marching band music. Not necessarily that they'd be marching, but just harmony music. And there are some traditions in Austria that still use the A-flat clarinet. It was used for a time in Spain as well, but past that, it just really never made it as a useful instrument. Which is interesting because some really big name composers wrote favorably about the instrument, including Richard Strauss and Arnold Schoenberg. Both wrote about the A-flat clarinet saying, hey, this is a great and useful tool and something that can really cut through the mass of strings and brass. It's a very bright and piercing sound. Now, something that you may think is that the A-flat clarinet will really help you get way up into the high register, and that's not necessarily the case. With all reed instruments, the reed is the limiting factor, not the length of the tube. So, what's interesting is that the E-flat clarinet won't be able to play that much higher than the B-flat clarinet. The B-flat clarinet won't be able to play that much higher than an alto, which is can't play that much higher than a bass. In fact, my friend Jason Alder, who's a contrabass clarinet specialist, can play just as high on his contrabass as he can on his B-flat. So the reed is a limiting factor. There is a physical cutoff point where a single reed simply will not vibrate anymore. And it's going to vary from reed to reed, but roughly it's about a written C7, which would be a high A on the E-flat clarinet. Now, some players can go a little bit higher. It needs an absolutely perfect reed for that. The A-flat clarinet, when I played it, I was able to barely squeak out a high F, which would be a D-flat. So we're talking really a half step difference in the upper range between the E-flat clarinet and the A-flat clarinet. It's not huge. It's going to be a slightly different timbre. In fact, the timbre of the A-flat clarinet when I played it was particularly sweet sounding. Very mellow, not a lot of the bite that we've got on the E-flat clarinet, but it's a different sound. It's one you don't see often, and unfortunately there aren't a lot of people who are willing to play it, and there aren't a lot of pieces written for it, and there aren't a lot of makers making it. The big maker who made it was Leblanc, and Leblanc went out of business in about 2010 when they were bought by Conn-Selmer. And the name Leblanc still exists, but the company is no longer in existence. Orsi in Milan will make one, and that's the one I play. And Ripamati, which is I guess rebranded itself as Ripa, makes one. Though, truth be told, I have not heard good things about the Ripa A-flat. They're notoriously out of tune, sad to say. But that's about what I know on the A-flat clarinet. It's a mysterious little beast. It's one that I was tempted to write for it in Symphony 2. And after just doing some research and some playing of it even, I decided against using it. So it's one of the few sizes of clarinets I've actually never written for. But there you go, A-flat clarinet. It's a rare, mysterious beast, and one you're not going to see too often. Again, I wish I had one to demonstrate, but they are super rare and hard to get a hold of. So there you go, A-flat clarinet.